Hello viewers, are you ready for wine yeast experiments? This is part 1. You see these 3 packets of yeast? Well, today you'll see me brew Korean rice wine with these different wine yeasts. And the big question is, how does the yeast affect the fermentation and the taste? If you like this video, please click that like button and subscribe. Click the bell to be notified of my new video published every Thursday. And please share this video wherever it is appropriate. I thank you for your help in spreading the word about rustic Asian rice wine. Traditionally, when brewing Korean rice wine, no additional yeast is added. And that's because nuruk is not just a source of enzymes, it also contains some yeast. But when I brew, I usually add wine yeast for consistency. It gives me peace of mind and ensures I'm always using the same kind of yeast, and it's the kind of yeast that has high alcohol tolerance. So my brews might be just a little bit stronger because of that. I usually use this kind of wine yeast, Red Star Premier Blanc, in the yellow package. But I was inspired by this sampler pack, which contains 5 different kinds of Red Star yeast, including the Premier Blanc that I usually use. So I have some more kinds of yeast to experiment with. If you're interested in this, see the link in the description. So I'll be brewing with this packet of Premier Rouge. This is the description of what Premier Rouge is intended for. Note that this is Saccharomyces cerevisiae. That's this species of yeast, and this kind is made in Mexico. Red Star is used as a brand name in the US for bread yeast, but it's also used for wine yeasts. The second one I'll try is this blue packet, the Premier Cuvée, and here's the description for that. Note that this is supposed to be a different species of yeast, Saccharomyces baianus. And Red Star wine yeast is produced by the company Fermentis, which is part of La Safra, which is the world's largest yeast corporation. So these are some of the most common yeasts out there. This is not an obscure kind of yeast. It should be easy to obtain. And the third kind of yeast we'll try today is this green packet, Premier Côte de Blanc. And here's the description for that kind of yeast. This is Saccharomyces cerevisiae again, and this one is made in the USA rather than Mexico and packaged in France. Okay, so that's interesting. This is obviously a multinational corporation of yeast. I don't expect the grape wine descriptions to apply to rice wine. And the reason for that is that the sugars are produced gradually in the rice wine, but in the grape wine, all the sugars are available at the start. And there's a lot of non-sugar compounds that either produce flavors and aromas directly or through the process of the yeast fermentation process. And those compounds are different between rice wine and grape wine. Other thing to note is that I'm going to be doing a single stage brew, and that will not test the alcohol tolerances of these yeasts. All 3 of these yeasts have pretty high alcohol tolerances, some more than others, but it's not going to reach that level of alcohol during this short brewing time for a single stage brew. So let's brew. First thing is to prepare the nuruk. So I'm doing 3 brews, 90 grams per jar, 270 grams in total. I'm measuring this out ahead of time because I'm going to sun my nuruk. Let's walk over to sunny area, and I wanted to get direct sunlight, but still protected from insects and from wind and moisture. The idea is to to let it have some direct sun that'll rejuvenate the nuruk. That's called the bapje method, and it's a traditional method. If you want to know more about this, please watch my previous video about sunny and watery nuruk. It's sunny today, so I'm going to leave it out here all day. It's protected by the stream, so it's okay to do that. If you can't do the bapje method, I recommend it. Like I said, watch the previous video to learn more. So this is the nuruk I'm going to be sharing between the 3 jars for this yeast brewing experiment. And of course, we're going to be overriding whatever yeast is in the nuruk with the yeast that's in these, with the wine yeast in these packets. Of course, we're brewing with chopped salt, 1 kilogram of rice for each jar. That's 3 kilograms in total. And as usual, wash and rinse the rice repeatedly. And that's going to take 10 or 15 minutes. You don't want to be harsh. You don't want to break the grains of rice. You just want to clean off anything that might be sticking to the surface of the rice grains. And remove any defective rice grains during this process. And that's one of the standard relaxing things to do. I'm going to soak this for at least 3 hours. And after that time, I'll pour it out into this colander. And rinse it off one more time with water. And let it drain for 30 minutes would be good. I have the steamer prepared, and the water is hot, almost boiling, and wrap up the rice in the dampened cloth, and I'm going to steam that for 40 minutes. As that rice is steaming, I'm going to divide the nuruk, 90 grams in each of these cups here. So to the nuruk, I add 200 milliliters of warm water, 33 degrees Celsius. That's recommended for these yeasts. On the packets, it does recommend mixing them with warm water before using. So that's what I'm going to do. So jar A is the Premier Rouge. And I put a teaspoon of yeast. And jar B is the Premier Cuvée. That teaspoon into the second cup. And for jar C, Premier Cote de Blanc. And that'll be, that's for jar C. So stir those up. Can you feel the steam? I open this, yes. Okay, carefully unwrap it. I'm going to move it over to some cooling racks, and I'm going to spread that out to cool basically to room temperature, or at least below 30 degrees Celsius. And after it's cooled, I'm going to weigh this. How much does 3 kilograms of rice weigh after steaming and cooling? The answer is the original 3 kilograms becomes 4.438 kilograms. And then divide the cooled rice evenly among the 3 jars. I think that's close enough. I did label the yeast cups to avoid confusion. all three yeast mixtures are bubbly and foamy. And to each jar, I add 800 milliliters of water. So together with the 200 milliliters earlier, that's 1 liter of water in total for 1 kilogram of rice. So I do that for each of the three jars. So they're identical except for the kind of yeast. Okay, now everything is set up. Time to mix by hand. With a clean hand, but with a hand nonetheless. And get some of those grains of rice off. That's good for A. And I wash my hands. Let's do it again. So I don't want to mix up the yeast in the different jars. That's why it's important to wash my hands in between these mixings. So wash my hands again and do jar C. Okay, so the goal is to separate all the grains of rice. That seems good. Mix together, keep the lid loose. And I'm going to put these in the cabinet out of sunlight. It's around 22 degrees Celsius. Should be good. And let these ferment. And the next morning, I look at it. Still pretty solid. Not a lot of liquid produced. But it does seem like some bubbles near the bottom. Some bubbles. I'm not going to stir yet. Rice is still too hard. I don't want to break the grains of rice. But I am going to listen and smell. I do hear bubbles in each of them, so that's good. Nice and active. And the aroma, well, A and B smell fruity like apricot, but C smells more bready. Okay, now later in the afternoon, that same day, I'm going to look at these again. I think there's more liquid in there now. It's going to be easier to stir. I do want to stir it twice a day for the first 2 days. And I am using 3 different wooden spoons consistently here. So I'm always using the same spoon for the same jar for mixing. And the next day, there already is liquid collected at the bottom, cloudy liquid. And note that they're a lot softer today and easier to stir. And a lot of the trapped bubbles of gas are released when stirring, so the level of the liquid goes down after I stir. That's something to notice. And on day 3, there's a substantial amount of liquid at the bottom. Day 4, yes, it's still there, and it's still cloudy, but maybe clearing up a bit. You can see grains of rice have fallen to the bottom, and that's especially happened for A and B. C has more of a layer of liquid in the middle. On day 9, the bubbling has really slowed down a lot. This is just a single-stage brew. I'm going to bottle today. So I boil my filter bag. Here's jar A. Do want to stir it, especially to avoid anything stuck on the bottom of the jar. And I'm going to dump it all out at once into the filter bag. Okay, I did end up with some bits of rice stuck on the bottom. I don't want that. I want to get every drop out of here. Okay, so that's good enough. Then I can, you can see liquid just starts falling out of the bag, but I'm impatient. I'm going to squeeze this, and it'll take about 10 minutes to squeeze everything out. And the leftover is 269 grams of jjigae. That's pretty normal. And what we have here is what we call wanju, the original alcohol. This is going to be basically undiluted makgeolli. So I store this undiluted. It's stronger than regular makgeolli. I'm going to filter jar B now. Okay, pretty good. Squeeze that one. So this is part of the fun of brewing. You really do use your hands to make something delicious. So that's part of the fun. So I don't mind spending the time to squeeze out these makgeollis. Okay, for B, 292 grams of jjigae, a little bit more than jar A. Now let's get that into the plastic bottles. Again, I have about 2 liters of wanju, undiluted makgeolli. Now jar C, I'm going to filter that same way. Jar C does smell different, but let's okay, that's quite clean. And I'm going to squeeze this one. And 271 grams of jjigae. That's the same as jar A. Here's the result: 6 liters of undiluted makgeolli, 2 bottles each for each of the 3 kinds of yeast. So Danyangju, a single stage makgeolli brew. It's fun and fast, and I wanted the least number of complications. I just wanted to focus on the yeast here without any more complicated recipe. This really is the simplest recipe possible. So I'm going to pour these out and taste them now. I already noticed aroma difference as it was brewing, but I'm going to taste it now. And also in a few days, I'm going to taste it again and do my complete tasting. And you'll see that now. So it's been 5 days, and now I'm going to compare these 3 brews made with 3 different yeasts. All 3 are single stage makgeolli brews, Danyangju, and they settled the same in these 5 days. They settled quite well. They're just Danyangjus, so they're not going to be that clear, but they did settle. I'm going to mix them up and taste the wanju and compare them. So I've labeled them. I have A, I have B, and I have C. So 3 different wine yeasts. I knew these wouldn't match with the tastes of the wines described on the packaging because, the flavors of wine generally come from the type of grape. So that makes a big difference in the flavor of wine. But I did expect some difference in flavor by using different kinds of yeasts in makgeolli. And what I'm tasting here is the undiluted makgeolli. That's the wanju. And since it's been 5 days, it's been in the fridge. When I poured it, I did notice some natural carbonation. So it was briefly fizzy. I could hear the bubbles and see the bubbles. It's not bubbly right now though. So I'm going to start with A and B. And when I tasted these before, A and B were very similar. So these both have sweetness and sourness. The sourness is not so lactic. It is more citric kind of sourness. I think the texture is better for both of these than immediately after bottling. It has a smoother texture now. It's a little gritty at the beginning. Okay, these flavors, okay, these both taste like good Danyang juice. But they don't have that lactic aftertaste that I often get. Aftertaste is citric and pretty sweet. Okay, so it's strong enough. I'm going to compare this with C now. So here's C. Okay, and C is definitely drier. Okay, so C is not as sweet. It might be stronger in alcohol. Yeah, okay, all of these are quite a clean flavor. No bitterness in any of these three. Although C does seem more astringent. Yeah, it's not, so C is not as sour and not as sweet. Still no lactic flavor. So that lactic acid flavor, that's something that I've grown to expect in Danyang juice. These all three of these taste fresh, as they should. They smelled fruitier as they were brewing, especially A and B. They did smell fruity as they were brewing, and C smelled more bready as it was brewing. Yeah, in terms of fruitiness now, it's mostly, I would say, kind of citrus, but not as strong. Grapefruit, maybe very mild grapefruit type flavor. That's what I get from both A and B. And like I said, as it was brewing, it was fruitier, more like apricot. But what I'm tasting now is simpler. And I don't know why, but A and B might be a little more sour than A. but they're both citric in flavor. And then C, yeah, way drier. Okay, so that's an interesting difference in flavor, but I can't really match it back to the variety of yeast or the description of what kind of wine this yeast is designed to produce. Doesn't really match up, and that's I guess that's to be expected. But I wish I had more theoretically valid explanation for the differences in flavor, or why A and B are similar. So if you look at it, A and B actually are different species of yeast. A and C are the same species of yeast, and but the flavors don't line up with the species of yeast. It seems like the variety within the species is influencing the flavor even more. So it's not just simply you can't just go by the species of yeast and the broad description of what kind of wine this is supposed to produce. You actually have to brew with it and see what happens. It depends a lot on the environment and the recipe you're using. That affects the flavor a lot. For makgeolli in particular, the recipe affects the flavor, and the new root gives a lot of flavor too. And the yeast gives some small variations that affects the sweetness and sourness and dryness of the brew. And these are just the first 3 yeasts. I have 2 more to try. I will do that. I will do that soon, and there'll be even more makgeolli for me to drink. So stay tuned for that. Thank you for watching today.